What type of building styles are there in Hoboken, New Jersey? Hey guys, this is Jeff Bonk with the HBB Group here in Hoboken. And a question we get asked all the time from new buyers who are considering moving to Hoboken is, what kind of buildings do you guys even have? Like, are they all high rises? Are they walk-ups? Do they have amenities? Like, what should I even be considering? What should I be looking at? Well, today we're going to take you through the 5 main types of building styles that we have here in Hoboken to figure out the best ones that fit the things you're looking for and the lifestyle you're looking to have here in this awesome square mile. So first, we're going to jump right into walk-ups. Now, walk-ups are usually older buildings. They're somewhere between 75 years old, 100-year-old buildings. They used to be maybe more single-family residences at one point, but now they've been converted to typically 1 floor per residence. Sometimes you have 2, creating a duplex. And for these types of units, you have one distinguishing factor, and that is that there's no elevators. You are going to be walking up at least 1 flight of stairs on the exterior of the building or multiple inside. The biggest things to consider here are you willing to do that walk? Do you have, or are you planning to have children? What does a stroller situation look like? Where are you going to put that stroller? All the things that come along with kids. Are you willing to carry groceries up 2, 3, 4 flights of stairs? The other thing to consider here is it very rarely has parking in these style buildings. And there's parking garages within 2, 3, 4 blocks away, but are you willing to do that? Now, on that front, and those are some of the drawbacks, you do have some positives. The buildings in the walk-up style are going to have the most character typically. They're going to have a lot of the old world charm. They're going to have a lot of the old world facades where they're going to have the nice brownstone fronts and the nice, brick facades that you won't find in some of the more modern buildings. So even if you don't like the walk-up, some people do choose those buildings because of those amenities and those features. The other thing that you'll have is you'll be typically in a more centrally located area of town. The buildings of this style are older and they are built in the more kind of desirable, centrally located parts of town where people can get to different things more quickly, right? They built there first and they kind of built out from there over the past couple hundred years. So that's another thing to consider on that front. And one more upside is many of these smaller buildings, these walk-up buildings that used to be brownstones, will have a private backyard for 1 unit or maybe a common backyard for 2 or 3 units. They're not typically very large buildings. They're usually between 2 and 4 units. So you get a little bit of a smaller, more intimate environment rather than some of the larger buildings, which we'll get into. Second type of building, these are boutique elevator buildings. Now, these buildings are not massive. They're typically 3 to 5 stories, and they're newer built, right? Because they have the elevators. A lot of times it's hard to get elevators in older buildings. So these are relatively new, 10, 20 years at the oldest. These buildings are unique for a few different reasons. One is the elevator, right? And you get that elevator in a smaller building feel, right? So a lot of times you get these elevator buildings that are 10, 12 stories, larger footprints, and you have a big community. These boutique elevator buildings are shorter, 3 to 4, maybe 5 units. They built a little bit higher than the older ones, and you have more modern finishes. These buildings will typically be 3 and 4 bedrooms because Hoboken has grown over time to need more of that housing. It was built a lot of 1 and 2 bedrooms about 50 years ago. So now developers know that they've built bigger units, and that's why you'll see that in the younger buildings. You usually have nice backyards on these, maybe a roof deck even, because it's a newer build. They built it to support a roof deck, and by design did that. And you'll typically have parking in these buildings as well. Not always, but you'll see it way more commonly than you will in a walk-up building, which the first floor will be just a residence. And this one was built with the known desire for parking. So they were built with a little bit of that in mind. Number 3, you have mid-rise elevator buildings. These are buildings that are bigger than the boutique elevator buildings, but not as tall as some of the larger scale high rises. These buildings are typically between 5 and 6 stories. Very commonly, they're built over a parking garage, so they will come with parking. The cool thing you start to see in these buildings, because they're a little bit larger footprint and they have a bigger community, maybe 50 homes, 25 to 75 homes in that range, you'll start to see things like gyms. You'll start to see things like community rooms, more maintained and manicured common outdoor spaces that maybe have a management company that's keeping the landscaping up and doing things like that. It doesn't fall on any of the individual owners. You'll have a management company that might deal with some of the repairs and maintenances rather than one resident that has to kind of take control of that in some of the smaller buildings. Here you have a professionally managed building. A lot of conveniences of some of the high-rise buildings without as big of a community, which we're going to get into in a second. From there, the 4th type of building here in Hoboken are those high-rise buildings. And the one distinguishing feature here is you're usually going to get a doorman because you have a larger building, you have a lot more going on, you have a lot more activity because of the just straight vertical nature of it. You have more residents, so you need someone to kind of manage the front door, make sure they know who's coming and going, since it is a little bit of a bigger building. With that, you're also going to find your more dramatic and more thought out amenities. Because you have a bigger footprint here and more residents to accommodate, you're going to have bigger gyms, you're going to have bigger community rooms, you're going to have maybe children's playrooms, you're going to have maybe work from home space. You might have some shops on site like coffee shops and restaurants and things like that. Because you have this larger footprint, you have more retail space bottom floor. That's what you'll find. Some of these buildings will have parking inside the building. Some might have it across the street, or you might have to rent it maybe just in an adjacent lot, but you're almost always going to have parking options. The other thing these larger buildings have, which is really cool, are transportation options that some of the smaller buildings don't have, specifically to and from the PATH station. So because these buildings have such large resident bases, they can afford, with the HOA fees, to hire a shuttle to drive back and forth to the PATH station during some of the more common commuting times. Also, one last distinguishing factor is they will have typically more views because they are higher, obviously, and built on the edge of town, because that's where Hoboken allows more height to be built in development. They have views of the city, views of even back west into Jersey of the sunsets, or views of the Hudson River, which are really desirable as well, one of the distinguishing features there. So that's your fourth option, are the high-rise buildings. And then the fifth type of housing you have is we have full single-family brownstones. Now, these are one of the more expensive options in town because it is a whole entire lot that you have the entire building. Think of like a condo, like one vertical unit all being yours. These have 3, 4, 5 floors sometimes. They can be anywhere from 15 feet wide to 25 feet wide. And they're built right in the mix, right next to all of the walk-ups that we started this video with, that have now been since split into individual residences. Think of this as the whole residence is one home that you can purchase. These will start around $2 million and up. The record sale is about $6.5 million for a home like this here. But this is the most suburban feel, most full home feel that you'll get in Hoboken. You'll have a backyard. You'll have multiple levels in the unit for separation. You'll have usually 3 to 5 bedrooms, somewhere in that range. And even some of them have really nice, well built out basements. So you really do feel like you have a whole home, which is really cool. The downside, crazy enough, all that money you're spending, you don't have parking usually on site. You usually have to go find street parking or rent a spot in a lot or buy a garage spot somewhere close by. So one important thing is looking how wide the street is. Like, can you double park to unload stuff to be able to then go park your car where you have to go, or are you going to have to figure out a different solution? So everything has its positives and negatives. These are the 5 basic types. It gets more granular. There's more nuances and more specifics that really can help you figure out what's best for you, what the building style is for you. I hope this is a great primer.